A real estate tycoon abandons his wife and black twins, who face a life-altering accident decades later. His empire crumbles, a shocking reunion unfolds, and a sinister plot threatens it all. Where are you listening from today? Drop your city in the comments and share your guess. Will this tycoon find forgiveness or face ruin? Subscribe now for our latest stories and hit that bell to never miss a twist. What secrets will unravel, and who will pay the ultimate price? Stick around to find out. The Chicago night was heavy with the threat of rain, the kind of oppressive August humidity that clung to the skin like a second shadow. In the sterile glow of Mercy Hospital's waiting room, Philip Harrington sat rigid, his knuckles white as they gripped the armrests of a cracked vinyl chair. At 25, he was a rising star in Chicago's real estate scene, a man who turned dilapidated warehouses into gleaming condos for the city's elite. His tailored suit, now rumpled after hours of waiting, spoke of ambition. His clenched jaw told of dread. Fiona, his wife of 3 years, was in labor, 2 months early, with their twin boys. The antiseptic stench of the hospital burned his nostrils, mingling with the bitter tang of stale coffee from a styrofoam cup he'd been nursing for 6 hours. His mind churned with visions of tiny, fragile infants tethered to machines, of his carefully curated life unraveling. Fatherhood, especially to premature babies, loomed like a storm cloud over his empire of glass and steel. Philip's world was one of control. Every deal, every handshake, every blueprint was a step toward dominance in a city that rewarded the ruthless. He'd met Fiona at a charity gala, her auburn hair and sharp wit catching his eye amid a sea of predictable socialites. She was a school teacher, grounded in a way that balanced his relentless drive. Their marriage had been a whirlwind. Passionate, yes, but always secondary to his hunger for success. Now, as the clock ticked past midnight, that hunger battled a gnawing fear. What if the twins didn't survive? What if they did, chaining him to a life of hospital visits and sleepless nights? His parents, old money aristocrats, had already hinted at their disapproval of Fiona's common roots. A scandal, any scandal, could ruin him in their eyes and those of his investors. "Mr. Harrington?" A nurse's voice sliced through his spiraling thoughts, her scrubs a stark white against the dim fluorescence. She was young, her eyes kind but tired. "The C-section was successful. Your wife is stable, and the twins are in the neonatal unit. Would you like to see them?" Philip's throat tightened, but he nodded, rising on legs that felt like lead. The corridor stretched endlessly, each step echoing like a gavel in his mind. Fiona had been rushed into surgery after complications arose. A sudden bleed, the doctor had said, his words a blur of medical jargon. They'd barely exchanged a frantic, "I love you," before she was wheeled away, her green eyes wide with fear. Now she was under anesthesia, the nurse explained as they approached the neonatal unit. "She'll wake soon. The twins are small but surprisingly strong for preemies." The neonatal unit was a cocoon of soft beeps and muted light, incubators humming like sentinels. The nurse led Philip to one in the corner, where 2 tiny forms lay side by side, swaddled in blankets no bigger than handkerchiefs. Their chests rose and fell in delicate rhythm, tubes snaking from their noses. Philip leaned closer, his breath catching and then freezing. The twins' skin was a deep, rich brown, a stark contrast to Fiona's fair complexion and their pale, almost translucent tone. His heart slammed against his ribs, a cold sweat prickling his scalp. "There's been a mistake," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. These can't be my children." The nurse's brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her face. "Mr. Harrington, these are the twins born to Fiona Harrington. A boy and a girl." Her tone was gentle, but it carried an edge of insistence. Philip stared at the infants, their tiny fists curled like secrets. Fiona's heritage was Irish, her family a lineage of freckled redheads. His own was English, pure as the driven snow, or so he'd believed. His mind raced, grasping for an explanation, and landed on the unthinkable: betrayal. Fiona had been unfaithful, and with a black man. In 1990, in their conservative, high society circle, this wasn't just infidelity, it was a scandal that would torch his reputation, his deals, his future. The implication hit him like a physical blow. rage and shame twisting in his gut. "Sir?" The nurse's voice was sharper now, concern creeping in. Philip's vision tunneled, the hum of the incubators fading to a dull roar. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "I need air," he muttered, backing away, his polished shoes scuffing the linoleum. He turned, moving faster, past the nurse's station where a clerk glanced up curiously, past other expectant fathers slumped in chairs, their faces lit with hope or exhaustion. The hospital doors hissed open, and the muggy night air slapped him as he stumbled into the parking lot. His Mercedes waited, a sleek black beast that promised escape. His hands shook so badly he fumbled the keys twice before sliding behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, a growl that matched the chaos in his chest. What would people say? His parents, with their thinly veiled racism, would disown him. His investors, already skeptical of his youth, would pull funding. Philip had built his life on precision, every move calculated to avoid failure. This was chaos, humiliation, a betrayal he couldn't face. He thought of Fiona, still unconscious, unaware of the storm he was about to unleash. Let her explain the twins' skin, the whispers that would follow. Let her face the gossip, the stares, the pity. He'd file for divorce, sever ties, and start over in a new city where no one knew his shame. As he sped onto the highway, the hospital's lights fading in his rearview mirror, Philip's mind conjured justifications. Fiona had lied, hidden her infidelity. The twins couldn't be his. Genetics didn't work that way, not with their pale lineage. He ignored the faint memory of a family story, a great-grandmother from some distant shore, dismissed as folklore. His foot pressed harder on the gas, the city blurring into streaks of neon and shadow. He was leaving behind not just Fiona and the twins, but the man he might have been, a father, a husband, a man brave enough to face the unknown. By dawn, he'd be halfway to a new life, the hospital a memory he'd bury deep, where it could never haunt him again, or so he thought. The Chicago night was heavy with the threat of rain, the kind of oppressive August humidity that clung to the skin like a second shadow. In the sterile glow of Mercy Hospital's waiting room, Philip Harrington sat rigid, his knuckles white as they gripped the armrests of a cracked vinyl chair. At 25, he was a rising star in Chicago's real estate scene, a man who turned dilapidated warehouses into gleaming condo for the city's elite. His tailored suit, now rumpled after hours of waiting, spoke of ambition. His clenched jaw told of dread. Fiona, his wife of 3 years, was in labor, 2 months early with their twin boys. The antiseptic stench of the hospital burned his nostrils, mingling with the bitter tang of stale coffee from a styrofoam cup he'd been nursing for 6 hours. His mind churned with visions of tiny, fragile infants tethered to machines, of his carefully curated life unraveling. Fatherhood, especially to premature babies, loomed like a storm cloud over his empire of glass and steel. Philip's world was one of control. Every deal, every handshake, every blueprint was a step toward dominance in a city that rewarded the ruthless. He'd met Fiona at a charity gala, her auburn hair and sharp wit catching his eye amid a sea of predictable socialites. She was a school teacher, grounded in a way that balanced his relentless drive. Their marriage had been a whirlwind. Passionate, yes, but always secondary to his hunger for success. Now, as the clock ticked past midnight, that hunger battled a gnawing fear. What if the twins didn't survive? What if they did, chaining him to a life of hospital visits and sleepless nights? His parents, old money aristocrats, had already hinted at their disapproval of Fiona's common roots. A scandal, any scandal, could ruin him in their eyes and those of his investors. "Mr. Harrington?" A nurse's voice sliced through his spiraling thoughts, her scrubs a stark white against the dim fluorescence. She was young, her eyes kind but tired. "The C-section was successful. Your wife is stable, and the twins are in the neonatal unit. Would you like to see them?" Philip's throat tightened, but he nodded, rising on legs that felt like lead. The corridor stretched endlessly, each step echoing like a gavel in his mind. Fiona had been rushed into surgery after complications arose. A sudden bleed, the doctor had said, his words a blur of medical jargon. They'd barely exchanged a frantic, "I love you," before she was wheeled away, her green eyes wide with fear. Now she was under anesthesia, the nurse explained as they approached the neonatal unit. She'll wake soon. The twins are small but surprisingly strong for preemies. The neonatal unit was a cocoon of soft beeps and muted light, incubators humming like sentinels. The nurse led Philip to one in the corner, where two tiny forms lay side by side, swaddled in blankets no bigger than handkerchiefs. Their chests rose and fell in delicate rhythm, tubes snaking from their noses. Philip leaned closer, his breath catching and then freezing. The twins' skin was a deep, rich brown, a stark contrast to Fiona's fair complexion and their pale, almost translucent tone. His heart slammed against his ribs, a cold sweat prickling his scalp. "There's been a mistake," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. These, these can't be my children." The nurse's brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her face. "Mr. Harrington, these are the twins born to Fiona Harrington, a boy and a girl." Her tone was gentle, but it carried an edge of insistence. Philip stared at the infants, their tiny fists curled like secrets. Fiona's heritage was Irish, her family a lineage of freckled redheads. His own was English, pure as the driven snow, or so he'd believed. His mind raced, grasping for an explanation, and landed on the unthinkable. Betrayal. Fiona had been unfaithful, and with a black man. In 1990, in their conservative, high society circle, this wasn't just infidelity. It was a scandal that would torch his reputation, his deals, his future. The implication hit him like a physical blow, rage and shame twisting in his gut. "Sir?" The nurse's voice was sharper now, concern creeping in. Philip's vision tunneled, the hum of the incubators fading to a dull roar. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "I need air," he muttered, backing away, his polished shoes scuffing the linoleum. He turned, moving faster, past the nurse's station where a clerk glanced up curiously, past other expectant fathers slumped in chairs, their faces lit with hope or exhaustion. The hospital doors hissed open, and the muggy night air slapped him as he stumbled into the parking lot. His Mercedes waited, a sleek black beast that promised escape. His hands shook so badly he fumbled the keys twice before sliding behind the wheel. The engine roared to life, a growl that matched the chaos in his chest. What would people say? His parents, with their thinly veiled racism, would disown him. His investors, already skeptical of his youth, would pull funding. Philip had built his life on precision, every move calculated to avoid failure. This was chaos, humiliation, a betrayal he couldn't face. He thought of Fiona, still unconscious, unaware of the storm he was about to unleash. Let her explain the twins' skin, the whispers that would follow. Let her face the gossip, the stares, the pity. He'd file for divorce, sever ties, and start over in a new city where no one knew his shame. As he sped onto the highway, the hospital's lights fading in his rearview mirror, Philip's mind conjured justifications. Fiona had lied, hidden her infidelity. The twins couldn't be his. Genetics didn't work that way, not with their pale lineage. He ignored the faint memory of a family story, a great-grandmother from some distant shore, dismissed as folklore. His foot pressed harder on the gas, the city blurring into streaks of neon and shadow. He was leaving behind not just Fiona and the twins, but the man he might have been. A father, a husband, a man brave enough to face the unknown. By dawn, he'd be halfway to a new life, the hospital a memory he'd buried deep, where it could never haunt him again. Or so he thought. The Chicago skyline glittered like a jagged crown against the October dusk. But in Philip Harrington's penthouse office, atop the Harrington Properties Tower, the air was thick with defeat. At 50, Philip was a titan, his silver hair and piercing hazel eyes commanding boardrooms and headlines alike. His empire, a sprawling network of luxury condos and commercial high-rises, had redefined the city's silhouette. Yet tonight, as rain lashed the floor-to-ceiling windows, that empire teetered on the brink. The real estate market had imploded. Housing prices plummeted, interest rates soared, and stocks, including Harrington's, were in freefall. Philip stood at the window, a glass of bourbon in hand, watching the city he'd conquered turn hostile. His phone buzzed incessantly, each notification a fresh wound. Another investor pulling out, another project stalled, another headline screaming, "Harrington's fall." The office was a shrine to his success. Mahogany walls adorned with framed awards and photos of ribbon cuttings, but it felt like a tomb now. His CFO, Margaret, sat at the conference table, her laptop glowing with grim spreadsheets. "Philip, we lost the Goldman deal," she said, her voice taut. "They're spooked by the market crash. Without their capital, we can't cover the loans due next quarter." Philip's jaw clenched, the bourbon burning his throat as he swallowed. "What about the Dubai investors?" Margaret shook her head. "They're out too. Everyone's running for cover." He turned, slamming the glass on his desk, amber liquid sloshing. "We built this city's skyline, Margaret. They can't just abandon us." But they could, and they were. Decades of ruthless deals, of outbidding rivals and charming skeptics, had made him untouchable. Until now. The market didn't care about his charisma or his legacy. It was a beast that devoured the weak. Philip's second wife, Claire, lounged in their Gold Coast penthouse miles away, oblivious to the crisis. Their marriage, a decade old, was a transaction, her beauty and social connections for his wealth and status. She'd never understood his drive, never cared for the late nights or the battles that built his name. They had no children. Claire had dismissed the idea, citing her figure, and Philip hadn't pressed. His heart, hardened by years of ambition, had no room for softness. Yet as the city's lights blurred through the rain, a flicker of loneliness gnawed at him, a void he couldn't name. He grabbed his coat, needing air, needing escape. "Keep working the numbers," he told Margaret, his voice clipped. "Find me a lifeline." The elevator ride to the lobby was suffocating, the mirrored walls reflecting a man whose confidence was fraying. Outside, the rain was a cold slap, soaking his cashmere coat as he walked aimlessly down Michigan Avenue. The magnificent mile, usually vibrant, was subdued, storefronts dark, pedestrians scarce. His phone rang, another reporter, probably sniffing for blood. He silenced it, his mind a storm of calculations. Could he sell assets? Restructure debt? Every option felt like surrender, a betrayal of the empire he'd bled for. Distracted, Philip stepped into a crosswalk, the traffic light a hazy red through the downpour. His phone buzzed again, a text from Margaret. "Board meeting tomorrow. They're talking bankruptcy." The word hit like a punch, stealing his breath. Bankruptcy, the end of everything. He didn't hear the screech of tires until it was too late. A delivery van, skidding on wet asphalt, barreled toward him. Pain exploded as metal met flesh, his body flung like a rag doll. The world spun. Rain, headlights, a scream that wasn't his. Then darkness swallowed him whole. He awoke to the rhythmic beep of monitors, the antiseptic sting of a hospital room. His body was a map of pain, ribs aching, head throbbing, an IV snaking from his arm. The room was dim, a single bulb casting long shadows. A doctor, gray-haired and stern, loomed over him. "Mr. Harrington, you're lucky to be alive," she said, checking a chart. "You lost a lot of blood, internal bleeding from the impact. We nearly lost you." Philip's voice was a croak. How am I here?" The doctor's expression softened. "Two bystanders donated blood at the scene. Perfect matches, thank God. Without them, you wouldn't have made it." Philip's mind, foggy from painkillers, latched onto the words. "Who were they?" The doctor hesitated, glancing at her clipboard. "Liam and Lucas Morgan. They were nearby when it happened and insisted on helping." The names meant nothing, but gratitude surged, a rare warmth in his cynical heart. "I need to thank them," he rasped. "Can you get their contact?" The doctor nodded, promising to pass the request to the hospital's admin. Philip sank back, exhaustion pulling at him. The accident was a wake-up call, a crack in his armor. He'd survived, but his empire was still bleeding out. Those donors, whoever they were, had given him a second chance. He wouldn't waste it. As the doctor left, a nurse adjusted his IV, her movements brisk. "You're a big name, Mr. Harrington," she said almost accusingly. "Papers are already calling this a miracle. Bet you've got a story to tell." Philip managed a weak smile, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Liam and Lucas Morgan. The names echoed, unfamiliar yet heavy, like a debt he didn't know he owed. He closed his eyes, the beeping monitors lulling him toward sleep. Tomorrow he'd fight for his company, track down his saviors, and reclaim control. The rain still pattered against the hospital window, a reminder of the storm he'd barely escaped, and the larger one still raging. For now he was alive, tethered to the world by the blood of strangers, their gift a mystery he was determined to unravel. The sterile hush of Philip Harrington's private hospital room was a stark contrast to the chaos of his thoughts. 3 days after the accident, his body was a patchwork of bruises and bandages, but his mind was razor sharp, fueled by a gnawing need to know who had saved him. At 50, he was no stranger to power, but lying in a hospital bed, tethered to IVs and monitors, he felt stripped bare. The Chicago skyline loomed beyond the window, its glittering towers a mocking reminder of his crumbling empire. Harrington Properties teetered on the edge of bankruptcy, and Philip, battered but unbowed, was determined to claw his way back. Yet the names of his blood donors, Liam and Lucas Morgan, had become an obsession, a puzzle he couldn't ignore. Who were these men, and why had they risked their blood for a stranger? Philip's assistant Evelyn arrived at noon, her crisp blazer and tablet a lifeline to the world outside. She'd been with him for a decade, her loyalty matched only by her efficiency. "I've got the report you asked for," she said, her voice low, eyes darting to the closed door. Philip propped himself up, wincing as pain lanced through his ribs. "The donors! What did you find?" Evelyn hesitated, her fingers tightening on the tablet. "It's, complicated, Philip. You need to brace yourself." His pulse quickened, a cold prickle of unease creeping up his spine. "Just tell me," he snapped, his tone sharper than intended. She tapped the screen, pulling up a file. "Liam and Lucas Morgan, 25 years old, twin brothers. They're venture capitalists, founders of Morgan Ventures, a rising star in tech and real estate investment. Based in New York, but they've been in Chicago for a conference. Their firm's worth millions, and they're known for sharp deals and staying out of the spotlight." Philip frowned, impressed but confused. "That's it? Why the hesitation?" Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "They were born in Chicago, Philip, in 1990, to Fiona Harrington." The name hit like a thunderbolt, stealing his breath. Fiona, his first wife, the woman he'd abandoned in a hospital bed 25 years ago, along with their newborn twins. His mind reeled, the room tilting as memories flooded back. Tiny infants with rich brown skin, his blind rage, his certainty of her betrayal. "That's impossible," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Evelyn slid the tablet across the bed, revealing a photo. Two young men stared back, tall and striking, their deep brown skin and high cheekbones unmistakable. Their hazel eyes, his eyes, pierced through the screen, a mirror to his own. Philip's hands trembled as he gripped the tablet, his heart pounding like a war drum. "They can't be." But the truth was clawing its way out, undeniable. Evelyn's voice was gentle but firm. "I accessed hospital records from 1990. The twins, born to Fiona, were premature. Their birth certificates list you as the father. I also ordered a DNA test, using your blood samples from the accident. It's a match, Philip. They're your sons." The room spun, the beep of the heart monitor a frantic counterpoint to his shock. His sons, the twins he'd rejected, convinced Fiona had cheated because their skin didn't match his or her pale complexion. He'd fled, filed for divorce, and buried the memory, building an empire on the ashes of his cowardice. But now the past had found him, not in accusation, but in salvation. Liam and Lucas had given their blood to save him, unaware, or perhaps all too aware, of who he was. Guilt, sharp and searing, twisted in his gut. He'd been wrong, monstrously so, and the weight of it threatened to crush him. Evelyn cleared her throat, pulling him back. "There's more. Fiona's family history. Her great-grandmother was of African descent, from a Caribbean line. It's documented in old census records. The twins' appearance? It's genetic, Philip. Recessive traits." His breath caught, a faint memory surfacing. Fiona showing him a faded photo of a dark-skinned woman, her smile radiant, during their courtship. He'd dismissed it, too enamored with her to care about her roots. But he hadn't known his history either. His father, a stern patrician, had once mentioned a distant relative from New Orleans, a story quickly hushed. Philip's ignorance, his prejudice, had fueled his betrayal. He'd abandoned his flesh and blood, not because of Fiona's infidelity, but because he failed to see the truth. He sank back against the pillows, the tablet slipping from his hands. "They saved my life," he murmured, the words tasting like ash. "And I left them." Evelyn's expression softened, but she didn't sugarcoat it. "They're successful, Philip. Brilliant, even. They didn't need you to get there. But they're here in Chicago, and they know who you are. The hospital notified them you wanted to meet." Panic flared, mingling with a strange, desperate hope. What would he say? How could he face the sons he'd forsaken, who'd risen to power despite his absence? His empire was collapsing, but this was a reckoning far greater than any financial ruin. "I want to see them," he said, his voice steady despite the storm within. "Set it up, as soon as I'm out of here." Evelyn nodded, already typing. "They're busy men, but I'll make it happen. Philip, be careful. They may not want a father now." The warning stung, but he deserved it. He'd spent 25 years running from his shame, building a life with Claire, his cold, calculating second wife, who knew nothing of this secret. Their marriage was a hollow shell, childless by her choice, passionless by his. Now the twins were his mirror, reflecting the man he'd failed to be. As Evelyn left, Philip stared at the ceiling, the heart monitor's steady rhythm mocking his turmoil. Liam and Lucas Morgan weren't just his saviors, they were his judges. Their blood coursed through his veins, a debt he could never repay. Outside, Chicago's towers stood defiant against the gray dawn, but Philip felt small, exposed. He'd built an empire on lies, but the truth had found him, and it was more terrifying than any market crash. He closed his eyes, the twins' faces burned into his mind, their hazel eyes demanding answers he wasn't ready to give. But ready or not, the reckoning was coming. The mahogany-paneled boardroom of Harrington Properties gleamed under the soft glow of a chandelier, but the air was thick with tension. Philip Harrington, freshly discharged from the hospital, stood at the head of the polished table, his tailored suit masking the lingering ache of his injuries. At 50, his silver hair and commanding presence still turned heads, but today his hazel eyes betrayed a flicker of vulnerability. It had been a week since he'd learned the truth. Liam and Lucas Morgan, the venture capitalists who'd saved his life with their blood, were his sons, abandoned 25 years ago in a haze of prejudice and fear. Now, they were here, in his domain, to discuss a potential lifeline for his crumbling real estate empire. The stakes were astronomical: his company's survival, his redemption, his chance to face the past he'd buried. Philip's pulse thrummed as he adjusted his cufflinks, awaiting their arrival. Outside, Chicago's skyline shimmered in the late afternoon sun, a testament to his decades of ruthless ambition. But the market crash had gutted Harrington Properties, and bankruptcy loomed like a guillotine. The twins' firm, Morgan Ventures, was a rising star, their millions a beacon of hope. Yet Philip knew this meeting wasn't just about business. Evelyn, his assistant, had arranged it with clinical precision, warning him the twins were aware of his identity. What did they want? Forgiveness? Revenge? Or simply to watch him squirm? The intercom buzzed, and Evelyn's voice crackled through. "Mr. Harrington, Liam and Lucas Morgan are here." Philip's throat tightened. "Send them in." The double doors swung open, and the twins entered, their presence like a storm rolling in. Tall and imposing, they moved with the confidence of men who'd carved their own path. Their rich brown skin glowed under the chandelier's light, their sharp suits tailored to perfection. Liam, slightly broader, had a neatly trimmed beard. Lucas, leaner, wore his hair in a close fade. Their hazel eyes, Philip's eyes, locked onto him, unreadable but piercing. Behind them, unexpectedly, came Fiona, his ex-wife, her auburn hair streaked with silver, her green eyes steady and warm. She wore a simple navy dress, her poise a quiet rebuke to the chaos Philip had left in her wake. His breath caught, the sight of her a knife to the heart. 25 years had passed, yet she was as radiant as the day he'd betrayed her. "Mr. Harrington," Liam began, his voice smooth but cool, "thank you for meeting us." He extended a hand, his grip firm, Professional. Lucas followed, his handshake equally measured. Fiona offered a small nod, her smile polite but guarded. Philip, she said, her voice a soft echo of the past. He gestured to the leather chairs, struggling to steady his voice. Please sit. I'm grateful you came. The twins settled across from him, Fiona between them, a tableau of the family he'd forsaken. Philip's prepared speech, pitched to secure their investment, dissolved under the weight of their presence. These weren't just investors. They were his blood, his shame, his second chance. Liam opened a sleek portfolio, sliding a proposal across the table. Morgan Ventures is prepared to inject $50 million into Harrington Properties, he said, his tone all business. It's enough to stabilize your debt and fund new projects. Our terms are outlined here. Philip scanned the document, its figures generous, almost suspiciously so. His company was bleeding, but this was a lifeline that could reposition it for growth. Why us? He asked, his voice low. You could invest anywhere. Lucas's lips curved into a faint smile, not unkind but sharp. Your firm has potential, despite the market. We see value where others see risk. Fiona's gaze softened as she added, and we believe in second chances, Philip. The words landed like a stone in still water, rippling through him. He swallowed, his mouth dry. Fiona, you never told them I was a monster. Her eyes met his, unflinching. I told them you weren't ready to be a father. They deserved hope, not hate. Philip's chest ached, her grace a mirror to his cowardice. Liam leaned forward, his expression neutral. Mom raised us to focus on what we could control. She said you had your reasons, even if we didn't understand them. Lucas nodded. We built our lives without you, but we're here now. This deal is business, not charity. The professionalism in their voices stung, but Philip saw the undercurrent, Fiona's influence, her refusal to poison them against him. He cleared his throat, forcing focus. Your terms are fair. I'd be a fool to refuse. But his mind screamed with questions he dared not ask. Did they know the full truth? Did they hate him? Fiona's presence, calm and composed, was a lifeline he didn't deserve. I'd like to discuss this further, he ventured, his voice cracking slightly. Perhaps over dinner tonight? All of us? The twins exchanged a glance, a silent conversation only siblings could share. Fiona spoke first. That would be good, Philip. We're staying at the Drake. 7 o'clock? He nodded, relief and dread warring within him. I'll make the arrangements. As they rose, Liam handed him a business card, the Morgan Ventures logo embossed in gold. We'll review the proposal tonight. Expect our final conditions tomorrow. Lucas's gaze lingered, assessing. Don't mistake this for reconciliation, Mr. Harrington. We're here for Mom and business. The words cut, but Philip held their stare. I understand. Thank you for this. Fiona paused at the door, her smile tinged with something unreadable. Pity, perhaps, or forgiveness. We'll see you tonight, she said, and then they were gone, leaving the boardroom suffocatingly empty. Philip sank into his chair, the proposal clutched in his hands. His empire hung by a thread, but the real battle was personal. Fiona's kindness, the twins' restraint, they were a mirror to his failures. He'd abandoned them, convinced of betrayal, blind to the genetics that linked them. Now they held his future, not just financially, but emotionally. The dinner loomed like a trial, a chance to glimpse the family he'd lost. He buzzed Evelyn. Reserve a private room at the signature room for 7, and pull everything you can on Morgan Ventures. I need to know who I'm dealing with. As he stared at the skyline, Chicago's towers seemed to pulse with judgment. The past had walked into his present, and Philip Harrington, for the first time in decades, had no idea how to control what came next. The private dining room at the signature room, perched 95 floors above Chicago, glowed with the soft amber of candlelight, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city's glittering expanse. Philip Harrington sat at the head of an elegantly set table, his silver hair catching the light, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the turmoil churning within. At 50, he was a man accustomed to commanding rooms, but tonight he felt like a supplicant before a jury. Across from him sat Fiona, his ex-wife, her auburn hair streaked with silver, her green eyes warm yet guarded. Beside her were their twin sons, Liam and Lucas, their rich brown skin and hazel eyes. His eyes, a living rebuke to the betrayal he'd committed 25 years ago. The dinner was meant to solidify their investment in his crumbling real estate empire, but the air crackled with unspoken truths, each word a step on a tightrope. Fiona's presence was a quiet storm, her poise unshaken, despite the years of struggle Philip had left her to face alone. Over appetizers, she spoke of raising Liam and Lucas, her voice steady as she recounted working double shifts as a teacher, earning a master's degree at night, and cheering at their science fairs and track meets. They were always brilliant, she said, a proud smile touching her lips. Reading by 4, coding by 10. Liam, the brother of the twins, chuckled softly. Mom made it sound easy, but we saw her sacrifice. Lucas, leaner and more reserved, nodded. She never let us feel like we were missing anything. Philip's throat tightened, each anecdote a dagger of regret. He'd been building condos while Fiona built a family alone. He sipped his wine, forcing a question past the lump in his chest. Fiona, how did you do it? Raising them, never speaking ill of me. Her gaze met his, unflinching. They deserved a father they could imagine, not a villain. I told them you weren't ready, that life is complicated. Her grace was a mirror to his cowardice, and he looked away, the city's lights blurring beyond the glass. The twins, professional but distant, steered the conversation to business. We're finalizing the investment terms, Liam said, his tone clipped. $50 million with oversight on major projects. Lucas added, we expect transparency, Mr. Harrington. No surprises. Philip nodded, grateful for the lifeline, but stung by their formality. This was no reunion, only a transaction, yet he clung to the hope of something more. As dessert arrived, chocolate torte with a raspberry drizzle, the conversation softened, Fiona sharing a story of the twins' teenage pranks. Philip laughed, a rare sound, and for a moment, the table felt like a family. But the illusion shattered when his phone buzzed, a text from Claire, his second wife. Where are you? We need to talk. He silenced it, his jaw tightening. Claire, with her cold beauty and socialite charm, had sensed his distraction since the accident. Their marriage, a decade-long alliance of convenience, was childless and passionless, her presence a shadow compared to Fiona's warmth. He'd kept his past hidden from her, but her suspicions were a growing threat. Unbeknownst to Philip, Claire's jealousy had festered into something sinister. That afternoon, she'd hired a private investigator, uncovering Fiona's identity and the twins' connection to Philip. The revelation ignited a fury. She, the flawless Mrs. Harrington, would not be eclipsed by a school teacher and her bastard sons. In a seedy bar across town, she'd met a thug named Vince, slipping him $10,000 and a photo of Fiona. Make it look like an accident, she'd hissed. A hit and run when she's alone. Vince, with a rap sheet longer than his conscience, nodded, pocketing the cash. Claire's plan was simple. Eliminate Fiona, sever Philip's ties to his past, and secure her place at his side. Hours later, as Fiona walked home from a grocery store in Hyde Park, her arms laden with bags, Vince's black SUV idled at a corner. The street was quiet, dusk settling over the brownstones. Fiona, lost in thought about the dinner, didn't notice the vehicle until its engine roared. Headlights blinded her, tires screeched, and the SUV struck, sending her sprawling across the asphalt. Pain exploded in her head, her vision blurring as blood trickled from her temple. The groceries were scattered, oranges rolling into the gutter. Vince sped off, his taillights vanishing into the night. A passerby's scream pierced the silence, and soon sirens wailed, an ambulance racing to the scene. Philip's phone rang as the dessert plates were cleared, the hospital's number flashing on the screen. His heart plummeted. Mr. Harrington, it's Dr. Patel from Chicago General, a voice said. Fiona Harrington was hit by a car. She's in critical condition with severe trauma to her eyes. You're listed as her emergency contact. Philip's blood ran cold, the twins' faces paling across the table. We're coming now, he said, voice shaking. Liam and Lucas were already standing, their chairs scraping the floor. Fiona's gentle smile from moments ago haunted Philip as they rushed to the elevator. the city's lights now a cruel backdrop to their fear. At the hospital, Dr. Patel met them in the ICU, her expression grim. Fiona's stable, but her corneas are severely damaged, she said. Without a transplant, she faces permanent blindness. Philip's knees buckled, guilt and rage warring within him. Liam gripped his arm, steadying him, his eyes fierce. She'll pull through. She always does. Lucas, quieter, stared at the ICU door, his jaw tight. Philip's mind raced. How had this happened? A hit and run, the doctor said. No witnesses, no license plate. The randomness felt wrong, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. He glanced at his phone, Claire's unanswered text glowing like a warning. Something dark stirred in his gut, a suspicion he couldn't yet name. As they waited, Philip stood by Fiona's bedside, her face bruised but serene under the harsh fluorescent lights. The twins sat close, their hands clasped, a family he'd abandoned, now united in crisis. He vowed silently to save her, to atone for the years he'd stolen. Chicago's pulse beat beyond the hospital walls, but in that sterile room, time stood still, the weight of Fiona's fight binding them in a fragile, unspoken hope. The ICU at Chicago General was a fortress of sterile silence, broken only by the rhythmic beep of monitors and the soft hum of ventilators. Philip Harrington stood by Fiona's bedside, his silver hair disheveled, his tailored suit creased from hours of vigil. At 50, he was a man who'd built an empire on control, but here in the harsh fluorescence, he was powerless. Fiona, his ex-wife, lay pale and bruised, her eyes bandaged after a hit and run that threatened to steal her sight forever. The twins, Liam and Lucas, sat nearby, their rich brown skin and hazel eyes, his eyes etched with exhaustion and resolve. Philip's heart was a battlefield of guilt and fury. The accident felt too precise, too cruel to be random. As dawn crept through the hospital blinds, casting slivers of light across Fiona's still form, a dark suspicion took root. Someone had orchestrated this. Philip's second wife, Claire, had sent another text during the night. "When will you be home?" Its casual tone jarred against the crisis, igniting a spark of doubt. Their marriage, a decade-long alliance of convenience, had always been cold, but her recent probing about his distractions felt ominous. Claire, with her icy beauty and socialite status, thrived on control as much as he did. Had she sensed Fiona's return, the twins' presence, and seen them as a threat to her carefully curated life? Philip's jaw tightened as he recalled her unanswered messages from the dinner, each one a breadcrumb leading to a truth he wasn't ready to face. He stepped into the corridor, needing air, and pulled out his phone. Claire's call log, synced to their shared cloud account, was a habit he rarely checked, until now. A number, unlisted, appeared multiple times in the past 48 hours. Calls made late at night. His pulse quickened. On impulse, he dialed Evelyn, his assistant, who answered despite the early hour. "I need you to trace a number," he said, voice low, discreetly and fast. Evelyn, ever loyal, didn't question him. "Send it over. I'll get my guy on it." Philip forwarded the number, his gut churning with a mix of dread and determination. If Claire was involved, he'd unearth her secrets, no matter the cost. By midday, Fiona's condition had stabilized, but Dr. Patel's prognosis was grim. "Her corneas are too damaged for natural recovery," she said, addressing Philip and the twins in a cramped consultation room. "A transplant is her only chance to avoid permanent blindness." Liam's fist clenched, his voice steady but fierce. "How soon can we find a donor?" Patel sighed. "The wait list is long. Months, maybe years. We'll test family members for compatibility, but it's a slim shot." Philip's mind raced. Family. He was Fiona's family, biologically, if not emotionally. "Test me," he said, surprising himself with the urgency in his voice. Lucas's gaze flickered toward him, assessing but silent. Patel nodded, scheduling the procedure for that afternoon. Evelyn's call came as Philip waited for his blood draw, his phone vibrating against the hospital's sterile quiet. "Philip, you were right to be suspicious," she said, her tone clipped. "The number belongs to a burner phone, but my contact traced its activity to a bar in Southside. It's linked to a lowlife named Vince Carter, ex-con known for hired hits." Philip's blood ran cold. Hired hits? Evelyn hesitated. There's more. Claire's bank account shows a $10,000 withdrawal 2 days ago. Cash. No paper trail, but the timing's damning. The pieces snapped together, a mosaic of betrayal. Claire had hired Vince to target Fiona, to erase the woman who threatened her status. Rage surged, hot and blinding. But Philip forced it down. Get me proof, he told Evelyn. Recordings, texts, anything. That evening, Evelyn delivered. A hacker she'd hired intercepted a voicemail from Vince to Claire, left on the burner phone. Job's done, lady. She's down. Won't see again. Where's my other 10 grand? The voice was gravelly, unrepentant. Philip listened, his hands shaking, in a hospital lounge where the twins couldn't hear. Claire's reply, captured in a second intercept, was chilling. You'll get it when I'm sure she's out of the picture. No mistakes. The betrayal was absolute. Claire, the woman he'd shared a bed with for 10 years, had tried to destroy Fiona out of jealousy. Philip's marriage, already a hollow shell, crumbled in his mind. He forwarded the files to a lawyer friend, instructing him to prepare charges, attempted murder, conspiracy, whatever would stick. He confronted Claire that night, driving to their Gold Coast penthouse while the twins stayed with Fiona. Claire lounged in a silk robe, a martini in hand, her blonde hair perfect despite the late hour. You're finally home, she purred, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. Philip tossed a USB drive onto the coffee table, its clatter loud in the opulent silence. Listen to it, he said, voice deadly calm. Claire's smirk faltered as she played the recordings, Vince's voice followed by her own, her face drained of color, her glass slipping to the floor, shattering. You can't prove anything, she stammered. Philip leaned closer, his rage a quiet blade. I already have. The police are on their way. You tried to kill Fiona, Claire. You're done. She lunged for her phone, but Philip was faster, snatching it away. Don't, he warned. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Claire's composure cracked, tears streaking her mascara. You were leaving me for her, she screamed. For them. I deserved better. Philip's disgust was palpable. You deserved nothing. The police arrived, cuffing her as she spat venom, her elegance reduced to desperation. Philip watched her go, feeling no pity, only a cold resolve. His lawyer confirmed the evidence was airtight. Claire would face years behind bars. Back at the hospital, Philip underwent the corneal compatibility test, his mind heavy but clear. The results, due tomorrow, would determine if he could save Fiona's sight. He sat by her bedside, her bandaged face a silent accusation. Liam and Lucas, returning from a coffee run, watched him warily. Claire's been arrested, he told them, voice low. She was behind the hit and run. Liam's jaw tightened, but Lucas spoke, his tone measured. You're handling it, Philip nodded. She'll pay, and I'll do whatever it takes for your mother. The twins exchanged a glance, their silence heavy with unspoken judgment. Philip's sacrifice was a start, but trust was a long road ahead. As night fell, Chicago's skyline glowed beyond the window, a city of secrets now laid bare. The sterile hum of Chicago General's surgical wing was a world apart from the glittering chaos of Philip Harrington's real estate empire. At 50, Philip stood on the precipice of a sacrifice that could redefine his life, his silver hair damp with sweat under the harsh, preoperative lights. The hospital gown clung to his frame, a humbling contrast to the tailored suits that had long been his armor. Fiona, his ex-wife, lay in another operating room, her sight hanging by a thread after the hit and run, orchestrated by Philip's now imprisoned second wife, Claire. The twins, Liam and Lucas, his sons, abandoned 25 years ago, waited in the corridor, their hazel eyes, his eyes, carrying a wary hope. Philip's decision to donate his corneas to restore Fiona's vision was more than medical. It was a desperate bid for redemption, a chance to atone for the family he'd forsaken. Dr. Patel, the ophthalmologist, stood before him, her clipboard a shield of clinical detachment. Mr. Harrington, the tests confirm you're a viable donor, she said, her voice steady but grave. But you need to understand the risks. Donating both corneas will leave you with significant visual impairment, likely permanent in one eye. Complications could worsen your prognosis. Philip's jaw tightened, the weight of her words settling like stone. He'd built towers that scraped the sky, yet this choice, trading his sight for Fiona's, felt like his tallest gamble. "I understand," he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his chest. "Let's do it." Patel studied him, searching for doubt but found none. She nodded, signaling the anesthesiologist to prepare the IV. Philip's thoughts drifted to Fiona as the needle pierced his arm. Her grace at their reunion dinner, her refusal to vilify him despite raising Liam and Lucas alone, had shattered his defenses. She'd given their sons a life of love and ambition, while he'd chased wealth and status, marrying Claire in a hollow alliance. Now Claire was behind bars, her betrayal exposed, but Philip's guilt remained, a debt only action could repay. Donating his corneas was his offering, a physical piece of himself to mend the woman he'd broken. The twins, venture capitalists who'd saved his company with a $50 million lifeline, deserved a mother who could see their triumphs. Philip, for once, wanted to be more than a name on a skyscraper. The operating room was a blur of masked faces and gleaming instruments as the anesthesia took hold. Dr. Patel's voice, calm and precise, faded into a distant hum. "We're beginning the procedure," she said, her scalpel poised. Philip's last conscious thought was of Fiona's green eyes, bright with hope before he'd abandoned her in 1990. Darkness claimed him, a void where fear and resolve intertwined. He awoke hours later, his head heavy, a throbbing ache radiating from his bandaged eyes. The world was a haze, one eye completely dark, the other catching faint shapes through gauze. The beep of monitors anchored him, their rhythm a lifeline. A nurse's voice, soft but firm, broke through. "Mr. Harrington, the surgery went well. Rest now." Pain flared as he shifted, but a deeper ache gnawed at him. Fiona. Had it worked? He croaked her name, his throat raw. The nurse hesitated, then said, "She's in recovery. Early signs are promising, but we'll know more soon." Relief, fragile but real, washed over him. He sank back, exhaustion pulling him under. By evening, Liam and Lucas appeared at his bedside, their silhouettes blurred but unmistakable. Their presence, once a source of dread, now felt like a tether. "You're awake," Liam said, his voice gruff but laced with something softer. Lucas, quieter, added, "Mom's surgery was a success. Her body's accepting the corneas. She's not out of the woods, but it's looking good." Philip's breath caught, a tear stinging his bandaged eye. "Thank God," he whispered, the words inadequate for the weight lifting from his chest. Liam's hand rested briefly on his shoulder, a gesture so fleeting it might have been imagined. "You did this for her," he said almost reluctantly. "That counts." The twins' restraint was a knife's edge, their trust a fragile thread. Philip knew he hadn't earned it, not after abandoning them as infants, blinded by prejudice over their dark skin. Yet their willingness to stay, to speak, was a crack in the wall between them. "How do I look?" he asked, attempting levity, his voice hoarse. Lucas's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. "Like you've been through a war." Philip chuckled, the sound raw but genuine. "Feels like it." The moment, brief and brittle, was a glimpse of what might be. A family, not whole, but healing. Dr. Patel visited later, her tone cautiously optimistic. "Fiona's corneas are integrating well," she said, checking Philip's chart. "Her vision should return gradually over weeks. Your left eye, however, will remain severely impaired. We'll manage the right with therapy, but you'll need to adapt." Philip nodded, the loss of his sight a price he'd accepted. "As long as she sees again," he said, meaning every word. Patel's eyes softened. "You've given her that chance. Rest now. You both need time." As night fell, Philip lay in the dim room, the city's pulse faint beyond the window. Liam and Lucas had returned to Fiona's side, their devotion a mirror to her strength. Philip's sacrifice hadn't erased his sins, but it had shifted something in the twins' gaze. Less accusation, more curiosity. Fiona's forgiveness, offered in her quiet grace, was a gift he didn't deserve, yet it fueled his resolve to try. His empire, saved by the twins' investment, was secondary now. This hospital bed, this pain, this family, they were his new foundation. Chicago's skyline glittered outside, indifferent to the man remaking himself within. Philip closed his one functional eye, Fiona's face vivid in his mind. He'd given her his sight, but she'd given him something greater, a reason to face the man he'd been, and the courage to become someone better. The road to redemption was long, but for the first time, Philip Harrington was walking it. The Chicago skyline shimmered under a crisp autumn moon, its towers a silent testament to Philip Harrington's once unassailable empire. At 50, he stood on the balcony of a modest Lincoln Park apartment, a far cry from the Gold Coast penthouse he'd shared with his now imprisoned ex-wife, Claire. The air was cool, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of new beginnings. Inside, the warm glow of a dining room spilled out, where Fiona, his first wife, and their twin sons, Liam and Lucas, gathered for their weekly dinner, a ritual born in the aftermath of trauma and sacrifice. Harrington Properties, revived by the twins' $50 million investment, thrived under their strategic vision. But Philip's true wealth was this fragile, hard-won family. Tonight, as laughter drifted through the open door, he felt the weight of 25 years of absence, yet also a flicker of hope that he might at last belong. The apartment, Fiona's new home after her recovery, was cozy, its walls adorned with photos of the twins' childhood moments Philip had missed. He'd moved here from his corporate fortress to be closer, a symbolic shedding of the Tycoon's armor. His left eye, permanently impaired after donating his corneas to restore Fiona's sight, forced him to adapt, but the sacrifice was a badge he wore with quiet pride. Fiona's vision had returned, her green eyes bright again, a miracle that bound them in ways words couldn't capture. Liam and Lucas, now 25 and leading Morgan Ventures, had softened toward him, their hazel eyes, his eyes, no longer sharp with accusation, but cautious with curiosity. This dinner, their sixth since the surgeries, was a bridge, each gathering mending a thread of trust. Inside, the table was set with Fiona's signature lasagna, the aroma rich with tomato and basil. Philip stepped in, his cane tapping softly, a necessity for navigating his visual limitations. Fiona, radiant in a soft sweater, smiled as she placed a steaming dish on the table. "You're late, Philip," she teased, her voice warm. "Sky-gazing again?" He chuckled, easing into a chair. "Guilty. Chicago's prettier from here." Liam, broad and bearded, passed him a glass of red wine, his grin easy. "Better view than your old penthouse, huh?" Lucas, leaner and more reserved, added, "Less pretentious, too." The banter, light but genuine, was a balm to Philip's soul, a stark contrast to the sterile boardrooms of his past. Dinner unfolded with stories and laughter, the twins recounting a recent deal that outmaneuvered a rival firm. "We learned from Mom," Liam said, nodding to Fiona. "She taught us to read people, not just numbers." Fiona's eyes sparkled. "And from you, Philip, whether you admit it or not, that ruthless streak, pure Harrington." Philip's heart swelled, her acknowledgement a gift. He'd been a ghost in their lives, yet traces of him lived in their ambition, their analytical minds. "I don't deserve the credit," he said softly, but Fiona's hand brushed his, a silent disagreement. The gesture, fleeting but intimate, stirred memories of their youth, though Philip knew their love had transformed, not romantic, but deeper, rooted in shared history and forgiveness. As plates emptied, the conversation turned to Harrington Properties. The twins, now majority stakeholders, had implemented changes, diverse leadership, community investment programs, and family leave policies. Philip, a consultant rather than CEO, marveled at their vision. "You're making it a company I'm proud to be part of," he said, his voice thick. Lucas raised an eyebrow, a playful challenge. "Took us to fix your mess, didn't it?" Liam laughed, but his eyes held respect. "You're not half bad as an advisor, though. Those zoning loopholes you found? Genius." Philip smiled, the praise a lifeline. He'd lost his throne but gained their trust, a trade he'd make again. The evening deepened, and Fiona brought out dessert, apple pie, its crust golden and fragrant. Philip noticed the twins' ease, their shared glances, and the way Liam automatically refilled Fiona's water before she asked. They were a family, forged in his absence, yet they'd made room for him. "I've been thinking," he ventured, setting down his fork. "I'd like to start a foundation through the company, for single mothers like Fiona was. Scholarships, Housing support? The table stilled, the twins exchanging a look. Fiona's eyes glistened. That's beautiful, Philip, she said. Liam nodded slowly. We're in. Let's make it real. Lucas, ever the skeptic, added, as long as it's not just a PR stunt. Philip met his gaze. It's personal. I owe it to your mother, to you. The promise hung in the air, a vow to build something lasting, not for glory, but for amends. As they cleared the table, Fiona pulled Philip aside, her voice low. You're different, you know. Not the man who left, or even the one who came back. You're trying and they see it. He swallowed, his throat tight. I don't deserve you, Fiona. Your forgiveness. She cut him off, her smile gentle. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing to move forward. We're family, Philip, messy as it is. The word family wrapped around him, a warmth he'd never known in his penthouse days. As the twins prepared to leave, Liam clapped Philip's shoulder. Next Friday, same time. Don't be late. Lucas, lingering by the door, offered a rare smile. And bring those foundation ideas. We're serious about it. Philip nodded, his heart full. Wouldn't miss it. Fiona hugged them both, her strength a quiet force, then turned to Philip. Stay for coffee? He did, the two of them sitting in her small living room, the city's hum a distant lullaby. They spoke of small things, her teaching plans, his new hobby of audiobooks, and the silence between was comfortable, a testament to their healing. Outside, Chicago's towers glowed, indifferent to the man remaking himself below. Philip Harrington had lost much, his sight, his marriage, his unchallenged power. But he'd gained a family, fragile yet fierce. The twins called him Philip now, not Mr. Harrington, a shift that spoke volumes. Fiona's laughter, Liam's banter, Lucas's cautious warmth. They were his redemption, his reason to keep going. The road ahead was uncertain, trust still a work in progress. But as he stepped into the cool night, Philip felt anchored, no longer the tycoon who'd fled, but a father, flawed and striving, finally home. Thank you for joining us on this gripping journey of betrayal, sacrifice, and redemption. What did you think of Philip's transformation or Fiona's incredible strength? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing from you. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to catch our next tale. Share where you're listening from, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the stories that connect us all. See you soon.